My beloved Orpheus, the day we were married, it was as if I was born again, but more beautiful. On our wedding night, you sang songs to every part of my body, sparing no effort. You wrote odes to my toenails, sonnets to the backs of my knees, an epic poem to the journey along my spine. As you sang, you mapped the territory. You named this world that is my body, your world, home. And at each new place you discovered, you planted your mark and you swore you'd never leave. Never, never leave me. I said, you might die in the war. You replied, oh, Eurydice, but my love is stronger than death.
Designing for landscape theatre is an interesting beast. It's not like working in the conventional theatre, mostly because you don't have the security of a conventional theatre. You can't make it dark when you want to. You can't focus a light to point people's attention in a direction that you want. And I think for a set and costume designer, it's an interesting process because you can't just plonk a stage and expect everyone to look at that stage and not look at the environment around them. So essentially the stage is the entire environment. If you can see it, then it's a stage. A lot of my process is working through the narrative of the show and discovering how I can enforce that narrative visually without arguing with the landscape that we're telling it in. WILDWORKS spent quite a lot of time working in Palestine. I was lucky to go over and work over there with some incredible people, and you see some amazing things, and it's a really beautiful landscape that is dotted with really aggressive structures that very clearly marcate boundaries and tell you where you are and you aren't allowed. And that was incredibly interesting to me, to look at all of that source material when looking at the border gate here and the gate to the underworld. Ironically, our underworld isn't that aggressive, and it actually isn't that, well, it is quite dark in places, but it's not an underworld, it's not a hell. It's actually quite light and funny in places, but for me it was really important that to an audience we tried to suggest that the place that you were going wasn't necessarily a positive place before we then actually unfolded that it had different layers to it.
The underworld is a free-form section of the show, if you like. It's our journey through seeing loops of people's journey in the underworld, their time in the underworld, and this has been really inspired by research that we carried, a lot of research that we know already from the project in 2014, and then also research that we've been doing with contemporary veterans as well. You sort of watch people wandering around, feeling like they really are starting to get lost in this place. We've given them lots of opportunities to see many different narrative loops that are taking place throughout the walled gardens, the flower gardens, ornamental gardens. So yeah, I think it works well in terms of also just sort of threading through some of that additional research that we've done to support the story.
So I started the process with the show of working with Myth on design and the rest of the creative team to work out what the journey of light would be through the show, and how each space was affected by sunlight, and also what we kind of needed narratively, and working with Myth as each space gradually evolved design-wise, working out what light and video and projection could add to that space in order to heighten it, in order to make it feel like otherworldly and like the underworld, or whether it had to feel really natural and kind of rooted and believable, which is kind of where we return to at the end of the story.
this scene is exciting because it's one of the penultimate scenes in the journey of the performance. So the sun's starting to set, we've got more control over the light, so introducing light and projection into this space was a really exciting idea. And so I kind of merged the two ideas that we could have paintings or a painting in the space that we could then use as a projection screen, and then that then went on a bit more of a journey, and not only do we use it for projection, but it also becomes a really exciting entrance for Persephone, who is the queen of the underworld.
Yeah!